2 years ago, I didn't even know what a manatee was. We don't have them in Germany, where I grew up, or in New Jersey, where I live now. Until I went down to Miami, Florida, for work for a couple of days. Hotel Urbano, where I stayed at, was running a promotion about endangered manatees by selling manatee plush toys. This triggered my interest and made me want to find out more about these creatures. During my journey of making this documentary, I encountered some of the happiest and some of the saddest moments of my life. I have also met some of the most amazing people. We can't let these animals go extinct, and I hope that with this documentary, I will be able to share my passion with you. My passion to save the manatee, before it's too late. The West Indian manatee is a marine mammal that lives around the coast of Florida, and in the summertime migrates as far out as Alabama, Louisiana, or Texas.
Manatee is a great big herbivore, just this huge eating machine. Takes it pretty easy. It rests and sleeps, it eats, and every once in a while it plays a little and maybe chases girls for a while, or gets chased if it is a girl.
Manatees have evolved without any natural predators. They are sometimes referred to as gentle giants.
Manatees can also be called sea cows because they eat seagrass.
Manatees belong to the order Sirenia. Sirenians have roamed our planet for more than 45 million years, and manatees have been around for about 15 million years. Early explorers at sea mistook manatees for mermaids. Manatees' closest living relative today is the elephant. Manatees have thick skin, and if you look closely, they even have fingernails. These gentle giants live mostly in shallow waters. They can live in salt, fresh, or brackish water, and they are herbivores. Their diet consists of a large variety of seagrasses, including turtle grass, shoal grass, manatee grass, mangrove seedlings, water hyacinth, and hydrilla. Every day they can consume up to 8–10% of their body weight. For a 1,200-pound mammal, that means it can eat up to 100 pounds of vegetation each day. Since these wonderful creatures are mammals, they need to surface to breathe. When resting, the manatee can stay underwater for up to 20 minutes. However, when they are active, they have to come up to breathe every 3 to 5 minutes. Manatees have nostrils that are covered with a skin flap, serving as a valve. So their nostrils are covered when underwater and can be opened when coming up for air. Manatees can communicate underwater by making squirks, clicks, or squeaks. Oftentimes, manatees are very hard to spot, since only their backs peek out of the water or the snouts surface when they breathe.
If you see a manatee swimming by, the movement of their tail usually creates a circular pattern on the top of the water, and they call that a manatee footprint.
Manatees are usually solitary animals, and the only long-lasting relationship is that between a mother and her calf.
The strongest bond in the entire manatee population is actually the bond between a mother and a calf. Calves learn a lot from mothers, everything as a matter of fact. Where to forage, where to find safe haven when it gets too cold, what to eat, what not to eat, what not to play with, when to sleep, how to rest in the perfect places. So they learn everything from their moms. They actually imitate exactly what moms do, and they become the manatees they are because of their mothers.
The manatee is an endangered species, although it has no natural predators. It is protected under the Endangered Species Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and the Florida Manatee Sanctuary Act.
Manatees were endangered because they were hunted until there were very low numbers, and so that was the original problem with them going way back before even Florida was really colonized to a large degree. Subsequent to that, really since the early part of the 19th century, the population's been coming back, certainly by the time of the mid part of the 19th century. But we have about 5,000 manatees today, but their habitat and their very existence is still threatened because of man has stopped hunting them, but is killing them in many other ways. Presently, in terms of man-related causes, watercraft deaths and injuries are the largest leading cause of death, of known causes of death. The second largest threat really to that, and it can exceed watercraft in a given year, is cold. If the manatees get too cold, they can die of cold stress or even severe cold stress syndrome. And we had just 2 years ago, almost 400 manatees die from cold stress alone.
The combination of cold and disease and then impacts from humans together are kind of a triple threat. And we can't necessarily do a whole lot about natural threats to manatees, but we certainly can improve the impacts from human beings.
At Blue Springs State Park, on Florida's East Coast, manatee specialist Dwayne Hartley goes out on roll call every morning. He measures the river and spring temperature and counts the manatees in the spring run. Manatees come into the spring when the river temperature drops below 68 degrees.
Basically, I carry on the manatee research database that really was started by Jacques Cousteau back in 1970. He came and filmed 11 manatees, 6 of those we kept track of, and 2 of those are still alive. And then when I came here, I took over the research responsibilities. But it's a life history program, and we try and just follow the life history of the manatees at Blue Spring.
With his notes and scar pattern charts, Wayne keeps track of the manatee population at Blue Spring. But what are ideal conditions when identifying manatees?
Ideally, at least no wind. So it's just, if it's glassy smooth, that's what I really want. Because even a little ripple, 1 scar turns into 2, 3 turn into 1. The sizes change tremendously. We have scar pattern charts, which are backed up by photographs. Photographs are really better, but scar pattern charts, I can carry all 300 animals out there in the canoe with me on the paper. And to do the life history, you have to re-recognize the animals, and that's what it's all about, is these scars. And we have fingerprints, manatees have scar patterns, but every year we have to go out and redraw and re-photograph because they've got new scars, old scars have healed and changed. So you just have to keep it up year after year after year to even determine how long a particular manatee lives. How many manatees do we usually see? It's been going up over the years. If you're talking about how many we see for a season, how many individuals. Last year we saw 400. I did a count a week or 2 ago and it was 458. So seeing 450 to 460 today when I started with 36, it's quite a change. I've always been interested in nature, in the outdoors, hiking, camping, what have you. People knew that. My grandmother gave me a book on North American animals back in 1953 for my birthday. And I would flip through it, see pictures, and say, well, that's an interesting animal. I'd read about it. And I saw this picture of a manatee. And that amazed me because this was a creature that should exist in Africa or South America, far from my country.
The manatee population is closely monitored all around the state of Florida.
There are a number of ways that we count manatees and also identify them individually, also do research through a mark recapture type of approach where you're looking at and trying to determine how well the population is doing from a standpoint of just designating a survival rate. And for those purposes, the state's really been divided up into 4 regions. And so there are actually survival rates being calculated for those 4 different regions. 2 of those regions have actually done quite well when you look at all the factors that you would use to do that, and they're really growing at a very, very good rate. A third one's growing at an okay rate, and the fourth one's had been actually in decline, but is starting to slightly increase in population. So I think it's sound science that manatee population has been growing. However, whether or not the threats they face every day and in these large ways are controlled, they're not controlled. And they can very well get much worse going forward. So we have to be very diligent about keeping those protections in place. When you do the aerial surveys, really all you're getting is a relative count or relative abundance and distribution. So you know about where they are and about how many there are. You don't know actually which manatee it is, and you don't know where it's been before that or after that. With the scars and so forth, through that, it becomes part of a mark recapture program. The scars the boats put on them actually do part of the research for you, because now you know when you see that manatee again that it's the same manatee. And if you keep that information for all these different manatees in all these different locations, then that information can be brought together and give you a better understanding of how the population's doing overall.
In Tampa Bay, Lynette O'Hara is the chair of the Manatee Awareness Coalition and works as the public outreach coordinator of the Tampa Bay Estuary Program.
The Tampa Bay Estuary Program has for about 15 years been the coordinating agency for a group called the Tampa Bay Manatee Awareness Coalition, which is a very diverse group of folks, some who are interested in advocating for better protection for manatees, some who are affected by rules to protect manatees, such as boaters or power plants. In Tampa Bay, it's really a two-pronged effort for manatee protection. On one level, we have a very extensive network of speed zones. The other part of that two-pronged effort is education, and that is at all levels and for all audiences, to try to instill in people a respect for manatees, an appreciation of their value as, native animals in Florida. There is not always 100% agreement, but there is usually some middle ground that we can find that provides some added protection for manatees, while also, protecting the interests of people who want to use the bay for either their livelihood or their hobby. And I will tell you that there is always agreement on education. Everyone will always agree that more education is needed.
3 manatee centers in Florida have made exactly this as their goal: educating the public about the manatee.
I saw the manatee at my grandpa's house, and the mom was feeding the baby. A long time ago, when I was at Georgia, I see a manatee, like this huge. It was a daddy one. In the medium, the mommy and the baby was in the mommy's stomach.
Fort Pierce, a small town on the east coast of Florida in St. Lucie County, right by Morris Creek and the Indian River Lagoon. This is where the Manatee Observation and Education Center has existed since 1996.
Morris Creek does not contain a lot of seagrasses and things that manatees could graze on, but we have observed mommy manatees coming in and parking their calves and go out and feed and then come back and pick them up.
The center was originally built because of the warm water outflow of the Henry D. King power plant. This attracted many manatees. Morris Creek sees manatees year-round, and in addition to educational facilities, the center offers a wonderful gift shop.
It's important to educate kids because, they're the up-and-coming generation, and if we're going to have any hope at all of saving our planet, as well as our marine life and our waterways, they need to learn early the proper things to do. We do have an exhibit hall. We have lots and lots of information as well as interactive exhibits. We offer all types of programs to the public. We also have a walkway along Morris Creek where you can look out and try to observe manatees in their natural habitat. We also have an observation tower that you can go up into. And that way you can look out across the lagoon. You have the possibility of seeing dolphins, manatees, birds, all kinds of wildlife. We have classes from the local schools that come in We educate about 5,000 school children a year.
Are manatees fish or are they mammals? Who could tell me? A mammal! So let's talk about how big a manatee can get. First, let's talk about our baby manatee here. I need 3 people to help me. Raise your hand if you'd like to come help me. The baby manatee is about 4 feet long. Can you hold that? I'm going to hold his head right there. And this manatee baby, being born underwater, can manatees breathe underwater? No. So what do you think the mom's going to have to do?
Get another manatee and push them up on their noses.
Yeah, so what happens is the mom's going to come up right under the baby's belly and give it a little push up to the surface, and then that way it's going to come up and stick its head out of water and get air. All right, so that's our baby. Now let's talk about how big the mama gets. You guys can have a seat. Thank you. Do you think that the mama manatee is as big as all of you?
Yes.
Let's see. We're going to take the head. You're going to hold it. So let's look at some reasons why we don't have that many manatees left.
Oh, I see this. A boat.
A boat, right? A boat. The boats have propellers on the back, and the faster the boat goes, the faster the propeller spins. So manatees underwater, sometimes it's too late before they realize that a boat is near them. And we already know they're not very fast swimmers, so many times manatees will get cut by the propeller. And one of the other main reasons why manatees are in danger is called habitat destruction. Tell me again what a habitat is?
A place where animals live.
A place where animals live. So destruction means that it's being torn apart. Well, manatees live in the water, but you know that things that we do on land can affect the water they live in. You guys, when you're at school or at home, on a playground, wherever you're at, make sure that you take your trash and you put it in the trash can. That's one of the #1 ways you can help lots of animals, not just manatees.
Another center is located on Florida's west coast, close to Tampa Bay. Manatee Education Center at Tico, Apollo Beach, right next to the power plant. The manatees are attracted by the warm water outflow the plant provides. People can walk along the tidal walk to see manatees. And even on days when it's warmer and not a lot of manatees are present, the center has a great educational facility with lots of information about manatees and interactive displays. A little further south on Florida's west coast is Lee County Manatee Park in Fort Myers.
This park is actually originally owned by Florida Power and Light, which is across the street. Years ago, what was happening is when they built the power plant, a byproduct is the warm water discharge, and all of a sudden the manatees started showing up here. And what was happening is people would stop along the side of the road to look at the manatees, and it became a real traffic nightmare that it was just unsafe. So what they did is they closed the park down. So there was a group of Monday Club kids that are a school group in Lee County that took on trying to get this park designed and going. So they started meeting with all the political parties and all the different people, and they're the ones that really got this park going. But the whole idea of the park is really for people to be able to see them, because most people, even people that live here, a lot of times have never seen manatees before. And this is just a great way for them to be able to see them. And the talks that we have here is really just the whole educational. Before I started working here, I did most of the things that you're not supposed to do, and it was just ignorance. I didn't know, and that's a lot of the problem. People don't know. They go to feed them, they think it's okay to feed them. Well, now you're harming them in the long run. You're hurting these animals. They come up to boats, they get hit, they don't know enough to get out of the way. They have no natural enemies except for us. And it's just, you know, and I don't believe that people do it on purpose to be mean. I just don't believe that. I think that what happens is they're so cute. You know, they come up to you and you're going to feed them or you're going to pet them. And we don't realize with wildlife we're injuring them in the process. So with the talks that we do, that's educating the people.
So tell me, who has seen a manatee before? Has anyone seen a manatee? Let me see. Yeah? When the mama manatee has a baby, the baby is going to drink milk from the mama, but the nipple is right here. It's not down on the chest, it's right here. So if you see a mama, if you see a bigger manatee with a smaller baby attached, like this, and they have a nipple on both sides, so the baby could be on either side. So the baby stays with the mama for 2 years, and the mama's not just nursing and providing it milk, what it's also doing is teaching the baby just like all mothers do. The next thing I want to talk about is I want everybody to smile. Go like this. Go like that. Has anybody lost their teeth yet? So manatees only have molars, okay? And what happens to a manatee is the teeth in the front wear down and they fall out. See what happens, the teeth in the back come in the back and then they move forward. They move forward. So as these fall out, new ones come in and they move forward. And this is called marching molars. Everyone say marching molars. I encourage people when you're manatee viewing to be manatee listening, because you'll hear the manatee when he goes to breathe come up to the top of the surface, and you'll actually hear the exhale, so you'll also hear that psh. And within about a second to a second and a half, while the nostrils are up above the surface, the manatee can exchange up to 90% of the air in its lungs, so it has a very, very efficient breathing system. Manatees, as all mammals, have hair. Hair is sparsely distributed throughout their bodies. However, on the face is whisker-like features. We call them vibrissae. And the most recent research is that these vibrissae are more like a sensory organ that allows the manatee to sense its food and perhaps even the warmer water.
And then something unforeseen happens.
We had a visitor come here today and they were just tickled to death that there was a manatee that we had in captivity so everybody could see him when they came. And we're like, there's no manatees in captivity, what are you talking about? So she took us down where she was talking about, and this manatee had gotten in an area that is not supposed to be. We've got bars up that they can't. Well, I guess the tide had gotten up so high that he went around it, and then the tide went out, so we got stuck in there. We have some fencing next to the pier, and it's never been a problem before, but what has happened is the tide came up so much today that I guess he was curious and he went around the outside of the fencing underneath the pier and got in there. Well, then the tide went out and he can't get back out now. It's not deep enough. We called the girls from the Fish and Wildlife Commission and told them about it. And they came out and they looked at him. And the manatee doesn't look like he's in distress, but he's obviously caught there. He can't get out. So their recommendation is, since the tide was going to be coming up in about 6 hours, let's see if he gets out, because he really seemed to be doing okay. And if not, then they'd have to come out and then we'd have to do some kind of rescue.
I think it'd come right up if we lose
He was earlier, the manatee has nose right there.
Trying to get back out.
Yep.
Yeah,
Try to get some pictures. I'm gonna make a couple phone calls.
In the meantime, I called my heavy equipment guys and asked them to come up here and look at this, because we knew that there's these bars and I can't get them out. What do we need to do? So since they came, they took their shoes off and got in the water and actually bent one of the railings out of the way so that the manatee could get out.
That's why I looked at you when they it's inside, so you can't really tell. You look almost the same.
That's right, it's just a rope slipping up the pole a little bit.
There's a poster in the street, and on the back it's got the anatomy. Oh, we'll be watching. This manatee? Yeah. Oh, we'll watch it. I'm here at 6. I'll probably come down and see if it's... Yes, well, you have to swim under the dock.
He keeps going up to the fencing there and puts his nose, but he hasn't gotten over far enough to get through the opening to get back out again. And we're guessing he's about 1.5 years, so we think his mother may be right around, because we've seen some bigger ones out there, and so there's a good sense manatees typically stay with their mothers for 2 years. His mom could be out there. The pole is out. We are hoping that he just moves out on his own, and that by tomorrow morning he's gone. If he's not, then the girls from FWC will come back down, and then we'll have to have an action plan how to get him. I'm guessing, scoot him out. to spook him out. They're not real smart, so we're hoping that he will find his way out.
On the northwest coast of Florida is the manatee town, Crystal River, where the manatees draw a large number of visitors every year. It is also the only place in the state of Florida where swimming with manatees is allowed.
Over 150,000 people come to Crystal River, just to Crystal River, to actually see and try to observe, or sometimes to get in the water with manatees. So it is definitely a very important industry here. We want to make it an ecotourism industry more than anything else, so that people come to learn about them and get to see them. Observation is the key here. I wish that everyone who comes to actually see them and not pet them. So it's a very important part of the local economy. There's estimates of anywhere between $20 million to $30 million in direct economic impact as a result of manatees just in the Crystal River area, Three Sister Springs and such. So it is a very, very important part of the entire economy for Citrus County. The Crystal River National Wildlife Refuge is a system of lands and waters set aside, in this case, for the protection and conservation of the Florida manatee. This refuge includes a lot of springs. This is one of the most important spring ecosystems in the entire state of Florida, one of the largest as well. What's unique about this set of springs is the access that it provides to manatees, with several springs spread out that can accommodate several hundred manatees at one time. Manatees come here to survive. They come here to conserve energy. They have over time identified these places as a safe place to spend the winter. So when waters drop below 68 in the Gulf of Mexico, they're forced to seek a place that provides waters warmer than 68. And with the 72 degrees that these springs provide in the water temperature, it's a perfect guarantee for manatee survival. Unfortunately, many people do not know that manatees are here to actually survive and conserve energy and not to amuse people. And people should be wary and mindful and aware that when they come here, they're actually going to be seeing manatees in their habitat resting.
Manatees are a very old creature. They're marine mammals. They have to breathe. They're warm-blooded. They come into these springs and bays to stay warm. This is survival for them during this time of the year. They need to be left alone, especially if there's no food available, so they don't need the stress of humans getting in the water. The lack of food perhaps is a stressor enough.
Oftentimes there is some confusion about what exactly constitutes a refuge and a sanctuary.
Basically, the whole area of Kings Bay is a refuge. Then, within a refuge, whether it's here or perhaps somewhere else, you have a more restricted area called a sanctuary. And it's sort of how people, you create your own sanctuary to get away from everybody.
Now, what do we do about people swimming and interacting with manatees? There are two extremes. One is, well, let's just stop it, completely, and that way we know the manatees are completely protected. Other people say, the manatees are doing well, they're recovering, so let's take away all the protections, because obviously they're doing well, they don't need them. But both of those are sort of the easy way out. The protections have been working because the manatees have been increasing, so that means the protections are working, so we need to allow them to continue. On the other hand, if the manatees are thriving, then it's important that we allow people to see these manatees, because the truth is people only protect what they love, what they see value in.
In years past, there was less concern for the swim industry of getting in the water, altering the behavior. Again, we witnessed people standing on them, sitting on them, riding them, pulling flippers, and holding them up for pictures. And I'll be honest, we would yell at them. But the swimmers weren't educated by the captains that were supposed to be doing that, so then the captains would start yelling at us. And we say, hey, they're standing on the manatee. That's against the law. And, well, they're my customers, they can do what they want. That was one excuse. They were having their swimmers tip people over, claiming they were hit, and then, try to get paddlers arrested to get us kicked out altogether.
But there is definitely conflict between the manatee swim with and what we encourage, which is passive observation. This conflict derives mainly from the fact that this was already an ongoing existing use. So for decades, people have been coming here from all over the world to actually swim and encounter manatees.
So it became obvious that if we were going to allow this activity to continue, it needed some kind of parameters, because after all, it's an endangered species, it's a protected marine mammal, and I don't know of anywhere else in the United States where there's a tourism industry built over actually touching an endangered species, much less a protected marine mammal in the wild. So, for this to continue, it needed some parameters, some regulations. The whole idea is now there's a whole list of regulations about what you can and can't do with manatees in the water. But if you would just simply practice that idea, that principle of passive observation, then you never have to worry about breaking any of the rules.
Crystal River has also always been an area well known and loved for its recreational value, including heavy boating.
Here in Kings Bay, this has always been a traditional multi-use area for boating. There's fishing in particular, and crabbing, things like that. But then also it's been used a lot for water sports like tubing, water skiing, things like that. And people do come here specifically to use the bay for that. And as you'll see, there's a lot of houses around the bay that have docks directly on the bay, and they may have jet skis or power boats, particularly that they want to use for those kind of high-speed water sports. Well, over the years, there have been manatees hit and killed here in Kings Bay. And so the conflict became, well, is this activity, this water sports activity, responsible for the death of manatees here in Kings Bay? And if so, what is the obligation of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to address those issues?
Boaters, of course, want to recreate in the way that they have traditionally done so. And there's been a new set of rules that prevent the local boaters of enjoying the recreation activities in the same way they used to 10 years ago.
The manatee is protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It actually allows for what's called zero take. In other words, no deaths, no harassment, anything like that. And our data showed that manatees were being hit and killed out in what's called the sports zone here in Kings Bay. It was sort of like a big donut around one of the islands here in the bay, where people in the summer could go 35 miles an hour or faster in sort of a big circle, so that they could water ski or jet ski or things like that, or go tubing. Well, our data revealed that some manatees were being hit and killed in that area. So the Fish and Wildlife Service was obligated to try to address that issue.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service worked out a compromise that would reduce the likelihood of take to almost zero, while at the same time, some of the water sports activities could continue.
There's several ways these laws are enforced. Now, we do have some volunteers who go out and educate the public, but now they have no ability to enforce laws at all, so they do simply education. Now, beyond that, sometimes people know better, but they do it anyway. So we do have law enforcement officers who can write, federal law enforcement officers who can write tickets on that kind of activity, and they have. But beyond that, the state law enforcement officers also incorporate federal law. So actually, the state officers can write tickets on that as well.
At least we can do is educate boaters and try and get them to understand that if they don't stop that behavior of violating speed zones or taking simple steps of how do I spot a manatee, then the state or the feds will come in with rules that they may not like and they can't work against.
Today, Crystal River sees more manatees than when the refuge was first established.
It is known that there were less than 150 manatees here when the refuge was first established in 1983. It's gone from approximately 100 manatees all the way up to almost 600 manatees. So it has increased by 500 manatees since the refuge was established, which pretty much means that what we're doing is actually working for them.
This has also led to discussion about whether the manatee should be downlisted from the endangered status to the threatened status.
Delisting a manatee is a very delicate decision when it comes to removing them from the endangered species list and categorizing them as a threatened species. In an ever-growing boating community in the state of Florida and decreasing habitat for the manatee, Manatee numbers, it's important to bring back the population in numbers, but it's all about how they're going to coexist with all this ever-increasing human use in coastal Florida.
In addition to this area being important for the manatees biologically, it's also important for them from an educational standpoint. Because this is the only area, not only in the state of Florida, but in the world where people actually can get in the water with manatees and swim with them, it becomes hugely important to use this as an educational tool.
So what we must do is share the waterways with the manatees and be conscious and aware of where manatees are, how they behave. And that's why we allow what we allow here. That's why we want people to actually observe the way manatees behave in their world, so that these children who are future boaters, future developers, they're future waterfront property owners, they know how manatees behave so that when they're on the water, they can actually be a little more cautious in how they operate their vessels around manatees, because we're going to be living with manatees for centuries to come.
Matt and Sue Clemens, owners of Aardvark Kayaking Company, offer eco-friendly kayaking tours in Crystal River.
The reason you're going out into Kings Bay today is to observe manatees, and I emphasize that word observe. We do not do the swim with the manatee programs, we simply do passive observation.
Here's an older map, but it still holds true for the most part. Everything in the darker magenta is sanctuary, off limits. And how do you identify a sanctuary other than a colored piece of paper? Is those vertical can buoys out there. That is what they look like. This is the creature we're going to look for today. West Indian, and they're calling it the Florida manatee. Education is key. We show the maps of the area. We orient people to where they're at. I show pictures of manatees in the anatomy, talking about where the spine and the lungs, and if a manatee is injured, why that's such an important aspect of the manatee survival, that it can't submerge itself. So, and then we talk about the rules of the road out on the water. We want our customers and students and clients to be safe out there and enjoy themselves. We do what's called passive kayaking as far as the manatees are concerned. We don't swim with the animals, we don't get in the water, and we don't touch them. We're concerned that the altering of behavior by the swimming people that do that is causing a habituation of behaviors associated with humans. We believe in keeping animals wild. So it's healthier for the animals, less stress. They don't have to move more often than they should. If a manatee is resting on the bottom, then and nobody's in the water, then it can rest through its whole cycle. If people are in the water, inadvertently, they don't know the behavior of the animals like some of us do, so they'll go over and interrupt it or wait till it starts rising up to get a breath of air, and they think it's game time for the manatee, and they get swarmed. And then that creates, again, more use of their energy that they need to conserve.
We have a vision that this will be the place here in Crystal River where people come to learn about manatees from all over the world. And the more people learn, the more people out there that are aware and conscious about the manatee way, what it is that makes a manatee, and why manatees come here. And I think that the more that we're going to have a sustainable population of manatees in Florida, I think we're going to see more harmony between all communities around Florida and manatees.
Monday, February 4th, 2013. 3 rehabilitated manatees are being released back into the wild at Homosassa Springs Wildlife State Park. Monica Ross from Sea to Shore Alliance, along with park staff and volunteers, has been waiting for this day to give these animals a second chance.
So what we are looking at with the weather is to try and release them the second day of a cold front that's moved through the area, so that wild manatees are using the warm water. The river temperature is cold, but they have the warm water from the springs. Currently, the program is only monitoring manatees that we consider naive, those animals that didn't have enough experience from mom when they were rescued, so they were rescued as orphaned animals, or if they might have been a captive-born animal that are going out. So currently, right now, those are the only animals that we're tagging, because they're still the ones that seem to have some little issues learning how to be a wild manatee.
Wooten is a male manatee who was rescued as an orphaned calf in February 2010 near Everglades City in Collier County. At the time, Wooten was only 4 feet long and weighed 97 pounds. Monica and her team are tagging Wooten before he's being released back into the wild. Today, Wooten is 8 feet long and weighs a proud 645 pounds.
What we are doing is putting a belt around what's called the peduncle area. In the belt itself, it has a weak link, so if the animal got caught on something, it would break loose. In the belt, there's a sonic, which allows us to track the animal in saltwater, but very, very close range, and then a VHF that allows us to try and relocate the animal in freshwater. And then there's a 4-foot long tether, and then the tag itself. The tag has satellite, VHF, UHF, sonic, has all the bells and whistles in it. So I can actually look on a computer and see where the animal is. It's usually about a 2-hour delay. And then if we need to actually go out and get visuals on the animals, which we do that several times a week, then we're able to actually track with the VHF and home in and where the animal actually is. For all these animals, before they are released, there's a health assessment that's done. Well, where the vet will actually draw blood, we'll do lengths and girths. So what I was doing is measuring and getting his length, getting his girths, and then that way, if we actually have to rescue him for some reason, we can have an idea of what kind of condition he was to what kind of condition that he is.
He's actually breathing a lot quicker than most of them do.
And we girth and Excella 147.
Thank you, buddy.
Very good breath.
Hold on, back off, everybody, back off. Really?
The next animal to arrive is Charlie. Charlie was rescued as a still dependent calf together with his mother near Placida in Charlotte County in November 2010. Unfortunately, his mother died from wounds she had suffered from a boat strike. Charlie was 5 feet long at the time and weighed 348 pounds. Today he weighs 690 pounds and is 8 feet long. Charlie arrives by truck from South Florida Museum.
Once the truck arrives at the release site, what we need to do is first get the animal lined back up into the stretcher, centered into the stretcher, get all the tracking equipment on them, take photos if they have any scars. That way we can ID the animal later. And then everybody just get on the either side of the poles of a stretcher and just lift them out and slowly walk them out of the truck.
Once Charlie is lifted out of the truck at Homosassa, he joins Wooten in the pool. Next up is Larak, a female manatee who arrives from Lowry Park Zoo, where she has been cared for since August 2010. Larak was rescued as an orphan in Cape Coral, Lee County. At the time of her rescue, she was only 4 feet long and weighed 63 pounds. On the day of her release, she measures 7 feet and weighs 695 pounds.
1, 2, 3.
Biggest threats that they have to face out in the wild are boats. That's a biggie, but really for them, because they're so naive, is learning the habitat that's out there, how to go and come, and then what to feed on. What we hope these guys will learn is, first of all, where the warm water is, so that next winter when it gets cold, they will come back to a warm water site. It doesn't have to be this one. At this point, it's their choice. But as long as they know out there it's cold water right now, and here is warm. What we are hoping that they will do is start following some wild manatees around, learn where the feeding areas are, learn where the fresh water is, learn where the refuge is for them to sleep and be away from the boats. So we will be keeping them monitored for a year until the end of next winter to make sure that they adapt. Each animal is different. We have no idea what's going to happen when we release them. So that's part of what our monitoring is. So we are monitoring them a couple of times a week, actually going out, seeing what their behavior is, and monitoring to see, is it seem normal or abnormal? And if we start to see some abnormal trends that makes us concerned, or their body condition is not looking good, then we will intervene, rescue them, and bring them back into captivity, get them fit again, and then re-release. And that has happened quite a few times. I mean, that is part of our program. From each animal we're learning to help apply for the next release. The reason why we are doing the work that we do is because we care about the animals, and we want to learn from the rehab animals that will actually even help the wild population. So if it wasn't for the public caring, all the different organizations everybody works for to help with the animals, we would not be here today doing this. And the nice part about these rehab animals is you never know what's going to happen, and we're here to help them. And that's the part that's nice, to be able to be here and make a difference.
This is the second annual Run for the Manatees, and it's sponsored by the Lake Magdalene Elementary Dads Club and also supported by Lowry Park Zoo of Tampa. Last night was the Manatee Mingle pre-race dinner. That was the first year we did that. And the idea of that was to kind of build on the success of the race from last year, expand it because of the cooperation we get with Lowry Park Zoo. They made the venue available to us. The elementary school mascot is the manatee, and the students are known as the little manatees. The thought was the school is the Little Manatees. Lowry Park Zoo is known for its manatee hospital, so that's how it became the Run for the Manatees. The Little Manatees of Lake Magdalene Elementary and the Manatee Hospital at Lowry Park Zoo.
I'm with Florida Fish and Wildlife, so we are here providing manatee education for this race, since it is funding for the manatees, as well as supporting Lowry Park Zoo for their manatee hospital. It's very important to have the kids here to know about manatees, just as far as education, and teach them so that hopefully they'll be safe boaters when they grow up and they'll know what to look for as far as rescuing manatees.
Lowry Park Zoo, along with Orlando SeaWorld and Miami Seaquarium, is one of the 3 critical care facilities for manatees in the state of Florida. At Lowry Park Zoo, Molly and a team of vets and animal carers treat sick and injured manatees.
Lowry Park Zoo has had a manatee hospital since 1991. It is the David A. Straz Manatee Hospital. We have treated over 300 manatees and actually been able to release almost 180 since it first opened. We get in manatees for all sorts of reasons. Usually boat strikes is the #1 reason that we get manatees in. We get cold stress manatees as well as red tide. We get entangled manatees that get caught in crab traps or fishing line. And then we also get in orphan manatees that maybe have lost their mom or something happened to her. We have 3 medical pools at our facility. When a manatee first comes in, they arrive and we have a truck that would pull up to the back of our facility here, and then we have medical pools that we can separate manatees as needed. Once the manatee is actually done with their treatments and is on the road to recovery, we will actually move them up to our larger pools, and we have 2 exhibit pools here, and it actually has underwater viewing that guests can actually see them and they can go underneath, and then we have a overlook also that they can go up to and see manatees up front.
One of those animals visitors are now able to observe is Gator. Female manatee Gator was found and rescued in Gator Hole, Crystal River, with severe pectoral entanglement. Gator was brought to Lowry Park Zoo's hospital, where the damaged flipper was removed in surgery.
Female.
Or did the rope just come off, or did you take it off? It's sitting in there. I don't know how it came off. Did you get the buoy off? Did you get everything?
Yeah, Ivan's got the low power boat.
Okay. Yeah, hey Bob, can you get photos of the base of the tail too, please? Yeah. Because that's pretty bad. Yeah, there is on both sides, and up here as well. So it's probably you know from your first. It needs a breath. Give me water. Roll down. Wait, I'm gonna give it a little water, guys. Yeah, that's fine.
Today, Gator is making good progress in her recovery and is able to eat and swim with just 1 flipper. She has to gain a little more weight before she can be released back into the wild.
Our manatees are all rescues. A lot of people don't realize that we are a hospital and all of our animals come here because they were sick or injured in some way. and that is always changing. Unfortunately, we've never had zero. We always have a case here. We actually have a special board that you can read and see who our cases are, and you can find out who's in each pool. We have a very large life support system here at our facility. We have over 200,000 gallons of water, and with a large capacity with over 10 manatees at a time, that's a very large biological load, so we have to keep that water clean as possible. So we have large sand filters that filter the water, and it goes through every 45 minutes, keeping that water clean. When the manatee first arrives, we need to basically check them for their vitals. We check their mouth temperature if it's a cold stressed animal. We're also going to see how they're breathing. That's usually the number one thing to see their respirations. We'll do blood work right away. That's number one thing that we'll do. And then if we need to do any sort of injections, antibiotics, we'll do that first thing when they first arrive. And then we'll put them right into the pool immediately after. And then we usually watch that animal. It could be for about an hour, and then it could be also 24 hours if we need to watch that animal, depending on their critical state.
And this cooler is just for our manatees.
Manatees eat about 8 to 10% of their body weight in the wild, and we want to do the same thing for them here. They eat a little bit of natural diet, so we actually go out and collect hydrilla and hyacinth for them, and that's because they all get released back at some point. So we want their bodies to be used to that natural diet and that they would know how to eat that once they return. Unfortunately, we cannot collect enough for them to eat and make up that 10%, so we supplement the rest of their diet with produce. 50% of their diet is then romaine lettuce, and then the other 50% is a combination of endive and escarole, and then that makes up about 10% of their body weight. Jolene came in just a few weeks ago, and she came in for cold stress. She is also a very small size, should have been with her mother, and unfortunately don't know what happened to her mother. With cold stress, we try to scrub their skin every other day, if not every day. They actually will lose their entire, or can lose their entire layer of skin with cold stress. It's basically like a bad burn, and we try to actually help them out with that. So we will actually scrub their skin down with an antibacterial scrub. And then she also got an injection. She got antibiotics, since with the cold stress, it can actually cause them to have a high white blood cell count. It's just like if you or I got hypothermia, it can lead to pneumonia, that sort of thing. So we want to prevent all of those things from happening. So it's just a quick treatment to make sure that she's on the road to recovery. Cold stress syndrome occurs when manatees actually get into cold water. Anything below 68 degrees, manatees can actually get ill. They don't have a large fat layer like you might expect, or a big blubber layer. They're a Caribbean species and need to be in warm water. So if they don't make it to those warm water sites, it could be a small animal, or if it's a very severe winter, they can start to get sick. And what happens usually is that their core body temperature will shut way down. It will go down to the 80s, where it's normally in the high 90s. The biggest thing we can do for them is actually get them into warm water. We have a pool that we can actually heat to about 90 degrees and get that core body temperature back up, and that in turn will then, they'll start to feel better and start to eat, and that also will help them recover. Medical pools are made so that we can actually do treatments very easily, less stress on the animal. We have pretty large pools, and they're about 8 feet deep. What makes that really nice is that the manatees can have a natural environment, but then when we need to do treatments, rather than having to take them out of the pool, we can actually just use a special floor that raises up out of the water, and we can get onto the floor with them, and if we need to hold them down with foam, we can do that to keep them quiet, and then we can do those injections or any skin scrubs or any sort of treatment quickly, and then hopefully get them back in the water as quickly as possible.
Today was Jolene's last treatment with antibiotics, and a little later, she is for the first time allowed to join Gator and the others in the larger pool.
All of our manatees, we hope that they'll make 100% recovery, and then our goal is to get them back to the wild as quickly and as safely as possible. So sometimes they can be here for just a couple months, or it could take up to a couple years, but our goal is to get them all healthy and get them back to return to where they were found and back to their life in the wild.
This is a manatee rib. There's one normal rib here that you see on your right side. This side's pretty healthy. Here's the 3 vertebrae, and this side was actually hit by boat. So it's showing the boat trauma. Once a manatee's ribs break, they go through a rehealing process, which we call remodeling, and the calcification will build up in order to heal itself. And this one's kind of an extreme case. It did live in rehab for quite some time afterwards, but ended up dying eventually because of the chronic boat-related injury.
The FWC works hard to rescue manatees all over the state of Florida.
We're at the Marine Mammal Pathobiology Lab in St. Petersburg, Florida. Our overarching agency is this Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. We were originally built to handle just a few dead manatees a year, like 100 say, and now we're consistently in the few hundreds every year. We have 5 field stations that cover the state of Florida for responding to dead and injured marine mammals, primarily manatees. The responsibility of our field stations are to handle calls from citizens. When they call in, we have an 800 number they can call. And when they call us in, they actually are routed to our regional law enforcement dispatch, and then we get a text. So if I'm standing here, my phone goes off, and there's a text that very well could be a dead manatee or an injured manatee we need to check on. And so once we get the text, we get the information, we call the complainant directly. We want to find out information of what's going on with the manatee. We get calls all the time that people think it's dead, and it's not dead. They think it's a manatee, it's not a manatee. There are common normal behaviors a manatee can display that people think there's something wrong. For instance, in mating, manatees can thrash and splash around a lot when it's normal mating behavior, and they think there's something wrong.
If we determine that there is something that needs further investigation, we send what we call first responder. That could be Park Service, could be other staff from other organizations, someone who has basic manatee knowledge that can give us more information.
When a dead manatee is brought to us, we do a full workup on it. We do an external exam. We're really trying to figure out the cause of death, determine why the animal died and what happened to it. Our goal is to determine cause of death on a manatee and use that information to send up to our managers who make decisions about how to manage and conserve manatees. So for instance, if we find lots of manatees are dying by watercraft collisions in a certain area, they may decide to send more law enforcement presence if it is already a slow speed zone. If it's not a slow speed zone, they may decide that that's an area they would want to institute a slow speed zone. So it's that kind of information that we get in necropsy that supports their decision making.
Isn't this kind of interesting to have 2 separate lung cavities? Split by well, we have a diaphragm, they have hemidiaphragms, but this whole area here is the lung, so underneath this tissue. So the lungs are very long, which makes them somewhat susceptible to boat strikes to the back. If they break a rib, you can puncture a lung. If you imagine, this is a very long area, so anywhere getting struck by a boat could potentially puncture that lung.
While Jolene, who Andy and his team successfully rescued, is on the road to recovery at Lowry Park Zoo, Andy heads out to rescue a manatee that has been spotted near Fort Myers.
Before we rescue it, the manatee is excessively buoyant, it has a watercraft injury on it, it's having trouble submerging, which for us is an issue. That means the manatee probably can't feed, and it's going to be potentially at the surface a long period of time where it might get hit by a boat again. So we decided at that point that we need to bring it in. Once we approach the manatee and get it into a position where we feel like we can set a net around it, we use our specialized boat that has a motor up front, and the back of the boat is open, so we can actually encircle it with a net. The net we use has a float line on top that keeps the manatee from going over, and then a lead line on the bottom that keeps the bottom of the net on the bottom so the manatee can't get out. And once the manatee is completely encircled, we start drawing the net back onto the boat using our crew.
Manatees can be out of the water for a fairly long time. They're mammals, they breathe air, they don't have gills like fish, so as long as we keep the manatee wet and comfortable, they can be transported for hours comfortably. We have a specialized transport truck with a lift gate on the back of it, and we are able to load the manatee into a stretcher, and then we put it on the lift gate, put it into the truck, and then it's transported to one of the critical care facilities in Florida.
The female manatee is transported to Lowry Park Zoo and given the ID number LPZ 103060.
Our goal is to intervene when we feel like we need to. When we don't think the animal is going to resolve the issue on its own. We'd rather the animal resolve its issue on its own, so sometimes it takes some time to try to figure out if the animal does need to be rescued. And when we finally make the decision to pull it in, we feel like the animal needs treatment, and unfortunately the animal was brought into Lowry Park Zoo, but unfortunately it died once it was at the facility, which does happen, and it's an unfortunate part of the process.
back at Blue Spring, Wayne is observing Manatee Georgia, who has adopted a calf.
Oh, good. Hello. You, Georgia? Yeah. Georgia and her little monster. Well, Georgia came in with a yearling that she was still nursing occasionally. And I guess she went ahead and weaned it and picked up this one. Manatees will do that. If they find, a calf in trouble, they'll adopt it. It gets a little complicated. Some mothers are more ready to do that than others, and some will do it here where they're confined with it, but the moment they're in the river, they'll just swim off and leave it. And it's also up to the calf. Some of these mothers, they won't adopt unless the calf really insists.
We try, the rangers here, and I used to be a ranger for 30 years, try to keep the people and the manatees apart. Well, when Georgia wants to be with the people, this becomes difficult. She goes to docks, and now that we don't have swimming, I think she spends a lot of time away from here in the winter, visiting the docks where she knows people will pet her and feed her, which of course is not allowed. It's against the law.
Another manatee, Camo, just had a calf the previous weekend. Now some confusion is going on. Has his second calf just been born?
I was home yesterday. It didn't look like a good day to come in, and I was told to look at the webcam that there was a big to-do going on, and that there was a little calf running around, and if it had a mother, they thought they knew which one it was and that I could tell them who it was. We were worried about confusing it with one born this past weekend. So I got up on the webcam and I realized, well, if somebody's a mother, it's Ann, which is a totally different animal from this past weekend. And eventually I saw, yes, she was with a little calf. So we believe that she's had her own calf. Camo had a calf this weekend. Apparently she may have lost it.
No calf. Oh, hello. You startled me. I can't tell who you are. And that's something for an animal to be that big, and I don't know who they are. And that's good, because I know who they are by their boat strikes. Yeah, the fact that there's more and more animals I can't identify is a good thing. Although, for the research program, it's frustrating. It's a good thing. I've got mothers that I can't identify. They're that old, and they're not badly scarred.
What I'm seeing now, as time goes by, there's more and more juveniles that I cannot recognize. We used to give everybody a name and a number, no matter what, even though we knew we'd never identify them again. So what we have is juveniles that have been coming in for 4 years. We have adults that have reached maturity and had calves, and we know they're Blue Spring animals, but we don't know who they are. And of course, this hopefully indicates that they are being protected by some of the things we've done.
Save the Manatee Club is a nonprofit environmental charity. We were formed in 1981 by Jimmy Buffett and Governor Graham, and we do what the name says, we save manatees. Everything from educating children to adults to what the problems are with manatees as an endangered marine mammal, to helping with research, helping with the laws that are enacted, the enforcement of those laws, and just wherever work needs to be done, supporting rescue, rehabilitation, reintroduction of manatees back into the wild. So at any element of it, we're involved with it somewhere along the way. Save the Manatee Club has many thousands of members that help through advocacy. We'll actually, whether it's working in the legislature or writing letters, getting involved with local county commissions, city government issues, right up through the federal government. Really, that's those citizen actions and getting involved with the best science behind it can really make a difference in going against, if you will, those who would rather not slow their boats down.
At Save the Manatee Club, you can even adopt your own manatee.
These are real manatees. You don't get to take them home and put them in your bathtub, but they're real manatees. They'll get a biographical sketch, they'll get pictures of them. Many of those are here from Blue Spring State Park where we are today. They learn about them, they follow them with our webcams, our live webcams. I'm really excited about the webcams because it can give people that entertainment value. Like I said, our adopted parents can see them, but more than that, we can look also and see how well lots of manatees are doing, but also individual manatees that we might be concerned about, whether it be cold stress or some other abnormality. We can watch them and see what's happening with them. Some people think that if you breed enough of any species in captivity, you can fix what you broke in the wild. That's just couldn't be further from the truth. The fact is that manatees actually reproduce really well in the wild. That's not the problem. For example, a manatee could live over 60 years, but they're dying around 11 to 13 years old. So even if you bred these others in captivity and put them out there, they're just going to be killed even faster because they're not going to be as fit as those that are born in the wild. So what we need to do is fix what's broken in the wild. We need to protect the manatees from being hit by boats. We need to protect the water quality and improve it, keep it clean. We need to make sure there's plenty of the water available to the aquatic ecosystems. And so when we protect manatees for the future and grow them, we protect those aquatic ecosystems for all those other species and for humans alike.
But even outside of Florida, as far away as Louisiana, New York, or Michigan, people care deeply about manatees and make efforts to protect them. Felicia Moller teaches her elementary school students in Tangipahoa, Louisiana, about manatees. She is widely known as the manatee lady at her school. Manatees are listed as a Louisiana endangered species. Felicia and her students are writing to the legislators in hope to get a manatee rescue and rehabilitation facility in Louisiana. In Queens, New York City, elementary school teacher Michelle Manners is teaching her students about manatees.
Manatees, big and gray, eat plants and grass every day, swimming slowly through the waterway. Manatees swim in the bay.
Well, what I've tried to do since 1991, when I first discovered manatees in Florida, was to bring this wonderful creature and all that it's capable of to my classroom, to teach children to be compassionate, to have a love for animals, and to appreciate the beauty of these creatures, because many of my children travel to Florida, and I would like them to go and visit these places where the manatees exist and appreciate them as much as I do. Sammy, why do you love manatees?
Because they're so big and to me they're cute. Cute.
You like cute? Okay.
I like manatees because they're endangered. And
Okay.
You don't see them a lot.
That's a beautiful answer. That is a good reason.
And I really like that they don't wanna harm you, but people harm them back.
You don't like that part of it. So each child has a picture that they do, whatever how they visualize the manatee, and goes with their poems. And this class will have their own book this year.
Bama and Zooey. Bama and Zooey were our adoptees last year. To us, they will remain always quite dear. Both captured and tagged so they could be tracked. Each year we just wait until you come back. As you go from Alabama to Florida, you have become a popular sight. We must fight, fight, fight. Your extinction can never be. You must stay for all to see.
Beautiful job. Every year we adopt 2 manatees, and we've been doing it since 1991, so you figure 2 times that, 2 times all those years. And this year we've done Squeaky and Rocket, their babies, and I think what the children are particularly disturbed about, that even these 2 young manatees already have scars from the motorboats, and we just keep spreading the word. And we hope we're gonna win, and these manatees will have a good life, and many more will be born and be safe. And that's my mission.
On your mark, get set. Go, go, go!
Today we are having the 10th annual Save the Manatee 5K run, 2-mile walk, and mini manatee mile. And this is an event that raises money for the Save the Manatee Club, which helps rescue and rehabilitate manatees and get the public aware of issues that are happening to manatees. I came up with this idea because I'm a biology teacher at L'Anse Creuse High School, and I've always had a passion for manatees ever since I was a kid. And I figured when we teach ecology to our students, why not introduce them to the plight of the manatee? So I came up with the idea to have a manatee race to raise money for them and just to see what happens. And 10 years later, we've donated approximately $70,000 to the Save the Manatee Club, and we've had over 1,000 participants, so it keeps getting more and more popular.
This is in recognition of Leslie Argeri for all her extraordinary efforts on the manatee's behalf. Thank you, Leslie.
When I started this event, I had a lot of positive feedback and still do from participants, and it's I think a lot of people do the event because it's quirky. There are no manatees in Michigan, but there are a lot of manatee lovers in Michigan. This event to me has become an obsession per se. I love manatees, I always have, and to see my race grow from year 1 to year 10 is unbelievable.
This year, Leslie was able to raise $17,000, bringing her 10-year total to $86,500. Raising money is of such great importance this year because Florida experienced the worst red tide outbreak in history, killing almost 300 manatees. Red tide is an algae bloom that produces brevetoxins, which manatees can inhale or ingest with seagrasses. The toxins have debilitating effects on the manatee's nervous system. This can cause seizures and paralysis, which result in the inability to lift their heads out of the water to breathe. All the rescue and rehabilitation efforts require a lot of dedication and money. But when spotted and rescued in time, manatees can make a full recovery.
Manatees are amazing animals. They actually are really good for the waterways. They eat a lot of vegetation, which can keep the waterways clear for those boaters, and can also eat a lot of invasive species. In general, they're really good for tourism for the state of Florida. People love to see them and love to go swimming and see them. So they're just an amazing animal, and they need to be treated that way.
Well, manatees are really a symbol of what's happening in Florida. They're a native species. They've grown up in this system. They don't attack anything. They're not vicious. They eat vegetation. They like to be left alone. Unfortunately, man's activities, whether they were the old days of hunting them until they were nearly gone, or today by running them over with the boats, not on purpose, but accidentally. But if we save manatees, we protect them from this harm, and we grow the population, we also have to protect the aquatic ecosystems. So whether it's the water quality, the water quantity, or the seagrasses, or all those things together, when we're saving manatees, we're saving all those elements of the aquatic ecosystem.
It is important to protect the manatee because it's a very critical part of our ecosystem. It is the grazer, the only grazer that nature has in Florida. They actually contribute to great healthy seagrass beds. Seagrass are an ecosystem of their own. They're very dependent on manatees. It's like mowing lawns. When we mow lawns, we're gonna have healthier lawns the more we mow them. We're gonna have healthier seagrass beds the more manatees eat on them.
Do we have a ways to go? Yes, because literally tens of thousands, probably 200,000 more people every year come here to see manatees. So it's re-education every time, every time, every time.
Manatees are federally in a state endangered species. I think a lot of people care about manatees and want them to succeed, want the population to grow or at least be sustainable. I have children, so of course I'd want manatees around for my kids and grandkids. So they're charismatic animals that are important to the citizens of Florida and to the country. In the world even.
I've now been working with manatees for about 4 years, and they're amazing animals. What they go through out in the wild, just knowing that they know how to find those migratory routes every year is pretty amazing to me. What they can go through and still be able to survive. Some of the boat strikes have been very severe. We've had ones that have come in with their calf, then have some sort of severe injuries, and still let that calf nurse from them. It's amazing. Sometimes they're really close to death and then been able to make a full recovery. They have that will and urge and want to fight for their life, and so we want to help them.
And if you'll come to SaveTheManatee.org, you can learn how to help that, and we do need a lot of folks to help us do that because there's so much more yet to be done.